Okay. So we got something wrong. He was not saying any of those things to Sanjeev Sanyal. Sanjeev Sanyal was not live at the same time as he. His face was on loop. That's why he was smiling creepily at the entire time.
गिरिनन्दिनि नन्दितमेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दिनुते गिरिवरविन्द्यशिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Really be Bharat and not India, or at least Bharat should be used much more than India, because Bharat is the name that has Indic roots, and we should not be promoting a name that was the name the outside world saw us by. That India was never really the name of this country. The name really is Bharat. India is the name the rest of the world, particularly the Greeks, started calling our country by. How do you look at the entire controversy that's playing itself out right now? Devdutt, Patnaik.
Namaste, Rahul. Thank you for inviting me. This is an interesting question, but let me give you a mythological answer. Now, in the Middle Eastern mythologies, there is an obsession with one god, one life, one prophet, singularity. Indian mythology loves diversity, plurality. So many gods, many ideas, many saints, many ways of thinking. We have always been a land which appreciates diversity and dynamism. So there is a Middle Eastern concept of singularity, and there is an Indian concept of plurality. So when somebody says we should have only one name, one idea, one thought, one language, they're really drifting towards Middle East, which is the mother of Western civilization.
Guys, what the fuck is this argument? Up until this point, I wasn't pissed off with him because he's just making an argument I disagree with, which I think is a hilarious argument. That India, that is Bharat जो नाम है, उसके बदले में सिर्फ भारत हो गया. That means we are heading towards a Middle Eastern ideology.
Right. I think India should retain its identity and celebrate plurality. And therefore, our gods, we have many gods, and every god has many names. So, you have Shiva, it can be called Shankar, can be called Bholenath. We have Vishnu, who can be called Narayan. So I think we belong to a land which celebrates diversity. We should not follow the Middle Eastern path. This is my personal view.
Could you share with those watching your understanding of the origins and the roots of the name India?
So the question about India, the origins of the name India, and you use this word native, Indic, this is foreign, this suggestion. So the word India is derived from a Sanskrit word called Sindhu. Sindhu means a river. Very specifically, it refers to the river that passes across India for several hundred kilometers before entering Pakistan. From Sindhu comes the name Sindhadesha. Now, the Arabs cannot pronounce Sa, so they started using the word Ha. So Sapta Sindhu became Hapta Hindu. Sindh became Hind. And 2,500 years ago, we have the Persian king referring to India as Hind. The Greeks come to India. They can't say Ha, they say E. So Indu, Indus, Indica. So Megasthenes writes the book Indica, but he's really referring to the word Sindhu. So the origin of the word India comes from the Sanskrit word Sindhu. Sindh, Hind, Ind. Sindhu, Hindu, Indu, Indus. In fact, the word Indu means the moon and is the name of Ramchandra's grandmother. So Ram, who established Ram Rajya, his father was Dashrath, his grandfather, that is Dashrath's father was Aja, who was married to Indumati. So maybe India comes from Indu, Indumati, Indus, Sindhu. So it's a very Indian sounding name. So we have associated it with the Greeks.
Acha, Indumati bhi has, therefore India is an Indian sounding name, very Indian sounding name.
Some people think it's the British, not really. That's really uneducated people say such things. But it's not even the Greeks. It's really a Sanskrit word from the Rig Veda, Sindhu, which gives us India.
That's as far as India's.
So this is the argument he will now repeatedly make, okay? But imagine this argument. India is a Sanskrit-based word, okay? Or is an Indian sounding name because up until 6 layers of distortion back, it was a Sanskrit word. Therefore, India, which was created after distorting the original Sanskrit word 5-6 times, उसके बाद जो word आया, वो भी Indian है, वो भी Sanskrit word है. So, if Sanjeev Sanyal is named today called Hanjiv Hanyal, therefore Sanjeev Sanyal's name becomes Hanjiv Hanyal, and everyone has to call him Hanjiv Hanyal. He has to call himself Hanjiv Hanyal, most importantly. And if he doesn't do that, if he calls himself Sanjeev Sanyal only, then he is heading towards Middle Eastern mythologies. Holy fuck.
Concerned. I was reading your piece this morning. Could you explain to our viewers your understanding of the emergence of the word Bharat, its various contexts, the context in the north, the context in the south, in the light of the suggestion that this is the true Indian and true native name of our country?
Yeah, so people have been asking me about Bharat. So the word Bharat comes from the word Bharat. And Bharat, the name first comes from the Rig Veda. You have Bharata, king of the Bharata clan, winning the battle of 10 kings in the Rig Veda. We don't know much about them. Now, Rig Veda happens only in the Kurukshetra region. Then you have the Mahabharata epic, again talking about the Bharata clan, and again it happens only in the northern part of India. Kuru Panchala region is roughly what is today Delhi, Mathura, up to Prayagraj. That's the zone. The first time the word Bharat Varsha is carved in stone, it is about 2,100 years ago in Odisha, in the Hathigumpha caves. You find this name Bharat Varsha, but it's referring to only the Gangetic region west of Magad. So it doesn't refer to the whole of India. So Bharat word really is a word which refers to certain parts of North India. Bharat Varsha refers to certain parts of North India. It's and it is a name given by Brahmins. So whenever people say Bharat, 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 Bharat Khanda, Bharat Varsha, these are really coming from Brahmin sources, Vedas, Puranas, Dharmashastra. Aryadesha, the land of Aryans. So Bharata is the king of the Aryans, the victorious kings of the Aryans. So it's a very North Indian Brahminical word that emerges. And one must remember that. There's another Bharat, of course, very famous from the Jain traditions, who is the son of Rishabhadev, the first Tirthankara. And Bharat is the first Chakravarti. And I believe that probably the word Bharat really comes from the Jain traditions, but we don't value Jain traditions. Remember, Jainism was very powerful at one time, but it was driven out of many parts of India, like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. So really, the Bharata Chakravarti would have been known in South India in a very, very big way. North Indian Bharat perhaps comes from Brahmin traditions, and the South Indian Bharat perhaps comes from Jain traditions. So, we have to think about these things, which we usually don't teach these things in history. Right? The Jain Bharata, who is a Chakravarti from South India, maybe, where, he visits his brother Bahubali statues in the South India. So we have to think about these characters also.
As people listen to both your answers, would it then be fair to conclude that Bharat?
तो ये both the answers बोला है, मगर संजीव सन्याल का रिप्लाई नहीं दिखा रहा है, because it otherwise would have probably showed that Devdutt Patnaik got hilariously destroyed in the debate. What sinister insanity is this?
The name has its origins entirely in India, where you gave the story about Indumati, which is, as you write, possibly also a WhatsApp forward, not necessarily entirely historical, probable, but not necessarily true. But on balance, the chances are higher that India was really an external interpretation of the name of our motherland. It had roots in India, but India is what the Greeks and the others called us. So then the question becomes, what should our country really be called? An idea which is native, or a name which is external to our country?
I don't think that the word Bharat comes from India and in.
So when he's saying these things, उसके पहले संजीव सन्याल ने पहले argument दे दिया था. Okay, remember that. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting too many times, but remember all these insanity he's spouting, because all these will be all these had been countered in real time by Sanjeev Sanyal.
India comes from foreigners. That's not a conclusion. That's your conclusion. That's a political conclusion, and that comes from Chanakya Niti of divide and rule. Sam, Dam, Danda, Bhed. But India comes from the word Sindhu, which is a Vedic word. Bharat comes from Bharat, which is also found in the Vedas. Bharat also comes from Bharat, which is a Jain word. So we must be aware that the word Sindhu was called Hindu by Persians and Hindu by Greeks, but they didn't give us the word. It comes from an Indian river, a Vedic river called Sindhu. So the Brahmins of India, the Brahmanas, they have controlled the literature of our land, right? So Aryans, the word Arya comes from Brahmins, but the Jains and the Buddhists look at Aryans very differently compared to the Hindus. So we must be careful of the Brahmin use of the word Bharat and appropriation from the Jain traditions, right? They're appropriating it from the Jain traditions. One can argue, but the word Sindhu is a Vedic word, and India comes from Sindhu. So this internal, external, it's again Brahminical, right? It's a past thing, right? What is internal is pure. What is external is malech, is impure, and the impure people should be kept out. The way untouchables were kept.
Okay, now guys, he's saying there should be no concept of outsiders and outgroups. Okay, it's fair enough to argue who you consider an outgroup. That should be decided. Okay, now maybe hypothetically, a religious society should not consider atheists as the outgroup and kick all of them away out of the country. That should not ideally happen, in my opinion. But if a country does do that, fair enough. They will lose their potential atheist contributors to the society, like Pakistan has. But कोई भी outgroup नहीं होगा, कोई outsider नहीं होगा. ये कैसा idea है? Which is why I was saying, does he have fucking doors in his home? Does he have locks in his home? Does he have a building wall in his campus? What the fuck is he talking about? You don't keep anyone out. in any context, in any situation. चलो अमित मालविया का मैं ढूंढते रहता हूँ यहाँ पे, ये चलने दो.
out. The untouchables were kept out of our villages. So we should not celebrate this mindset. It's not healthy. This is a very Brahmin caste mindset. That internal things, अंदर की चीजें कोटियाड़ के अंदर रखो, उसके बाहर उल्लंघन, Sita crossed the Lakshman Rekha and therefore becomes impure. Outside is bad, inside is good. Not a healthy mindset, I think. We are a plural country. We allow things to come in,
हाँ, मिल गया. Congratulations to us, guys. Thank you, Jain दोस्तों, for recommending this. Oh my God. So imagine Sanjeev Sanyal's brilliance, that he works out a lot. He's a Taekwondo black belt, is still fit as fuck. He's 55 years, about 52, 53 years old. He's the economic advisor to the prime minister of the biggest democracy in the world. G20 summit सर पे है. उसके बीच में कैजुअली जाके हिस्ट्री डिबेट कर रहा है और धो डाल रहा है ओपोनेंट को, जो कि सो कॉल्ड इंटेलेक्चुअल है. इतना धो डाल रहा है क्योंकि जिससे कि चैनल को डिलीट करना पड़ रहा है वीडियो. ओके, that's the stature of Sanjeev Sanyal. Sanjeev Sanyal is the only one who comes close to being Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek Ramaswamy is basically J-Sai Deepak and Sanjeev Sanyal fused into one. Yeah, I found it, guys. So now let's check from here. Thank God for Elon Musk.
Can be called Shankar, can be called Bholenath. We have Vishnu, who can be called Narayan. So I think the question about India, Sindhu, Hindu.
Well, I don't even understand
Eastern sensibility rather than the Indian sensibility, which picks plurality, multiplicity, diversity, and therefore this needn't be picking Bharat over India. Both can coexist at the same time. Just philosophically, on the government at this moment wanting to push the name Bharat, the Prime Minister's tag for ASEAN, before that in Egypt saying Prime Minister of Bharat, the President's invitation says President of Bharat. How are you seeing this play out? Are we wanting to up the ante and recalibrate the prioritization of the use Bharat? Sanjeev Sanyal.
Well, I don't even understand what the debate is about. I mean, the fact is that Bharat is a well-established name for India. It's there in our constitution. So is India, by the way. It's the constitution starts with India, that is Bharat. So both the names have been in wide use. In Indian languages, we normally use Bharat. Happened to be that when we use English, we tended to use India, but there is nothing in there not to allow us to use Bharat as well. As I said, the constitution, the English version of the constitution, starts with India, that is Bharat. So, it is, I think we should be happy enough to use the name Bharat commonly. And by the way, we are hardly the only country in the world that has multiple names. I mean, you have the United Kingdom, which is also called Great Britain. You have Netherlands and Holland. You have Japan and Nippon. So, we can also use Bharat and India interchangeably when we wish, wherever we want. So okay. I don't see why somehow the use of the word Bharat is somehow seen as an intrusion into the English language.
Devdutt Patnaik, could you share with those watching at this moment your understanding of the origins and the roots of the name India?
So the question about India, the origins of the name India, and you use this word native, Indic. This is foreign, this suggestion. So the word India is derived from a Sanskrit word called Sindhu.
So
Sindhu
I'm skipping this part a little,
very
okay?
Specifically, it refers.
We know what you said.
The Greek's father, that is Dashrath's father, was Aja, India.
Sanjeev Sanyal, one of the things that's been said is that Bharat is the native name of our country, whereas India is a foreign imposition. The Greeks use the word India. It comes from the word Sindhu, but it's not really an Indian origin name. The likes of Devdutt Patnaik would argue, giving the reasons that you just heard, that it is as Indian or as much a part of our culture as Bharat is, and therefore it isn't correct to say that this is a foreign imposition. How do you give us your understanding of the roots of the name India, and whether you truly think that India is an external imposition?
Well, first of all, India is a foreign name, but it is indeed of Indian origin. Part of what Devdutt said is correct. So let me explain how the name India came about and how the name Bharat came about, but they actually come from the same origin. So you need to understand what the origin is. Now, the name Bharat actually has two origin stories. There is an older origin story, which is a Vedic origin story, and a later one, which is a Puranic one. But the link between the names Bharat and India actually go back to the Vedic story, the original Bronze Age story. So let me tell you that story, then you will immediately understand how this works. So back in the early Bronze Age, the Vedic age, we are told in the Rig Veda that there was a tribe called the Bharatas, or also called the Trutsus, who lived in roughly what is now Haryana. And they used to call their homeland Sapta Sindhu, or the land of the seven rivers. Now, what happens is that the Bharatas are attacked from the west by a coalition of 10 tribes. And there is a great battle on the banks of the river Ravi, or then called Parushti, in which the Bharatas completely decimate the 10 tribes. Then what happens is that they turn eastward and they defeat another chieftain called Bheda on the banks of the Yamuna. So what happens is that the Bharatas, start out from this original homeland called the Sapta Sindhu in Haryana, and they spread out and create India's first empire. And their chieftain, whose name is Sudas, then conducts the first Ashwamedha Yagya and becomes a Chakravartin, whose symbol is the wheel. So we have the Mauryan wheel in our flag, but the origin of the idea of it being the symbol of power actually goes back to King Sudas of the Bharata tribe. Now, note here that there is two words. One is Bharata, and there is Sapta Sindhu. The Sapta Sindhu is the name of their homeland, and Bharata is the name of the tribe. Now, note here next what happens. What happens is that the Bharatas, they do something quite unique. You see, typically a tribe would just impose their gods on whoever were the defeated gods. Instead, the Bharatas call all the defeated tribes, and even the tribes that were surrounding them, they hadn't defeated them, but were in contact with them. And they basically put together all the knowledge they had, which we now know as the compilation of the Vedas.
Guys, pausing just to say one personal anecdote, that when I read this thing in Land of Seven Rivers, okay, this was in the very first or second chapters, I think, probably second chapter. This is when that light bulb went off in my brain that what? India is a great country. This is the start of India. This. And then he went to write insane other things as well in this book, Land of Seven Rivers, which he named Land of Seven Rivers because it is the land of Sapta Sindhu. And this is where my love for Indian culture, heritage, history, everything started.
The first three Vedas. And in the very last chant of the Rig Veda, there is something like a contract between all these tribes where they say that, look, we will give all the tribes and their gods a place around the sacrificial fire. So in the very last chant of the Rig Veda, all the tribes that they knew about, all their gods were given a place around the sacrificial fire. So it's sort of like a contract. And in some ways, this is the idea of pluralism that triggers Indian civilization. It is an idea of assimilation as opposed to imposition. Now what happens is this idea begins to spread. So over a period of time, this idea, more and more gods have given place around the sacrificial fire, and more people begin to accept the identity of being Bharatiya. And so by the Iron Age, the whole landscape of the Indian...
Yes, we are ready to accept. But the acceptance can't be just our one-sided invitation. Okay, nahi aao. No, I accept you. No, I accept you. They also have to say that, yes, I accept you. And therefore, I also agree to sit beside the fire with you. And if I even don't agree with your God, I don't even want my God to be worshipped by you. Even then, he is allowed to live here like Jews and Parsis. But वो अगर कोई ये भी नहीं करेगा, assimilate भी नहीं करेगा, और अशांति से अपने आप में भी नहीं रहेगा, तब तो प्रॉब्लम होना ही है. तब तो एथनो मेजोरिटेरियनिज्म होना ही है. क्या करें?
Subcontinent has come to call itself Bharatiya, and the land of the seven rivers idea, the Sapta Sindhu, then comes to cover the whole idea. So you end up with this chant, which is very commonly used even today during when you do ritual baths and so on, which goes somewhat like this. Gange cha Yamunu chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalasmin Kuru. So what does it do? The seven rivers, which were originally just the tributaries of the Sindhu of the Saraswati, it didn't include, by the way, the Sindhu river. The Sapta Sindhu includes only the tributaries of the Saraswati originally. They came to take over all these rivers across India, which went all the way down to Kaveri. So now all of India becomes Sapta Sindhu. Okay, so this is the origins of the name Bharata as per the Rigvedic tradition.
Okay.
Now what happens is other countries also call India Sapta Sindhu. Now in the Avesta, which is the Persian texts, what happens is there's a phonetic shift. Devdutt also mentioned a phonetic shift among the Arabs. Actually, it's amongst the Persians, the ancient Avestan Persians. And the sound of Sa becomes Ha. So Saraswati becomes Harahati. By the way, the same thing happens in modern Assamese as well, as it happens to be. And so Sapta Sindhu becomes Hapta Hindu. Now, I'm telling you this because there's confusion, because the word Sindhu is used in isolation to mean the Sindhu River or the Indus River. That's not the case. The first known use of the word Hindu comes in the context of Hapta Hindu, i.e. Sapta Sindhu, which is the name which the Western Persians called India. And by the way, there seem to have been some dispute between the Westerners and the Vedic Indians, because they tend to mention that the Hapta Hindu region had had gone into bad times and bad things had happened there and so on. So there obviously some sort of a conflict going on there, which we can't tell what exactly it is.
Okay.
Anyway, this is the origin. Hapta Hindu is the origin of the word Hindu. Now, that is correct, that this word then goes further westward and then becomes India. So you go from Sapta Sindhu to Hapta Hindu to Hindu, and then that becomes India. That part of it is absolutely correct. This random extrapolation into the word Hindu, which is an Indian word, etc., which Devdutt did, there is no historical evidence of that. That is a separate issue altogether.
Okay.
But this part of the story that I said, which is the link between Bharata and Sapta Sindhu, is an old one and a very well-established one in the text.
Devdutt Patnaik, I was reading.
Sanjeev Sanyal is being respectful. He at best, what you can accuse of Sanjeev, what can you accuse Sanjeev Sanyal of doing? He said he used the word random. Maybe that was a tad bit rude. Okay, a tad bit. But Devdutt Patnaik is saying he is a politician. This is casteism. This is Middle Eastern mythology, Middle Eastern ethics. सब कुछ घुसा दिया संजीव सन्याल के ऊपर.
Reading your piece this morning, could you explain, as you see it, the emergence of the word Bharat in the context of this being the native name of our country?
Yeah, so people have been asking me about Bharat. So the word Bharat comes from the word Bharat. And Bharat, the name first comes from the Rig Veda. You have Bharata, king of the Bharata clan, winning the battle of 10 kings in the Rig Veda. We don't know much about them. Now, Rig Veda happens only in the Kurukshetra region. Then you have the Mahabharata epic, again talking about the Bharata clan, and again it happens only in the northern part of India. Kuru Panchala region is roughly what is today Delhi, Mathura, up to Prayagraj. That's the zone. The first time the word Bharat Varsha is carved in stone, it is about 2,100 years ago in Odisha, in the Hathigumpa caves. You find this name Bharat Varsha, but it's referring to only the Gangetic region west of Magad. So it doesn't refer to the whole of India. So Bharat word really is a word which refers to certain parts of North India. Bharat Varsha refers to certain parts of North India. It's it is a name given by Brahmins. So whenever people say Bharat, Khanda, Bharat Varsha, these are really coming from Brahmin sources, Vedas, Puranas, Dharmashastras, something like Arya Desha, the land of Arya.
Okay, I'm not in favor of casteism, but Brahmin sources नहीं होगा तो कहाँ का source होगा? शूद्रों का क्या अलग source होगा? उनका अलग books होगा, और उस books में क्या अलग सा history होगा कि नहीं हमारा देश भारत नहीं था, हमारा देश का नाम था पाकिस्तानगढ़, ऐसा कुछ नाम होगा. Sources तो scholars जो है उस समय का वही लिखेंगे. So it's like saying that 1000 years from now, these were PhD sources, these were scholarly sources. वो professors का source है, वो real source नहीं है. Or is he making the argument that yes, scholars can be corrupt, so even today we should not listen to scholars, we should not listen to PhDs, we should listen to only P&O.
So Bharata is the king of the Aryans, the victorious kings of the Aryans. So it's a very North Indian Brahmanical word that emerges. And one must remember that. There's another Bharat, of course, very famous from the Jain traditions, who is the son of Rishabhadev, the first Tirthankara. And Bharat is the first Chakravarti. And I believe that probably the word Bharat really comes from the Jain traditions, but we don't value Jain traditions. Remember, Jainism was very powerful at one time, but it was driven out of many parts of India, like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. So really, the Bharata Chakravarti would have been known in South India in a very, very big way.
Okay. Before some now Ambedkarite jumps on this particular part of the clip and ignores the rest of it and says that, see, Hindus drove out Jains. So at some point of time in India, everyone or the other drove someone or the other out, but that driving out, was it driving out of the people, destroying their home, their temples, their livelihood, everything, or was it a driving away of the ideology? Just like during the Pal dynasty of Bengal, Hinduism could be argued that it was driven out. Entire Bengal became Buddhist because of Pals, and उसका non-violence हम लेके बैठे थे, और उसके बाद आए पत्थरबाज, लो तुम non-violence खाओ बैठ के. Or and that is why I don't take part in that Borgi versus Bengal debate at all, because even Pal Rajas went up till Punjab to invade. Okay, so did they do that peacefully? क्या जाके पीसफुल एक ट्रांजिशन ऑफ पावर हुआ? अच्छा, तुम आज तक पंजाब का राजा थे, आज से हमारे अंडर राजा बन गए. कोई युद्ध बुद्ध नहीं हुआ. तो कोई ना कोई किसी के साथ युद्ध तो करेगा. उसका रेलेवेंस क्या है? कितना जेनोसाइड हुआ था, कि सिर्फ लोग वॉर में मारे गए थे, और वॉर के अलावा क्या हुआ, और आज उसका रिलेशंस क्या है उन दो जगहों में, और उनके descendants में. That is the only thing I'm concerned about. Because if you want to keep harping me with Borgi versus Bengali, I will bring out everything I know about Ghoti versus Bangal. Okay, Bangal families have kind of forgiven Muslims for what they did because of the communist mindset, but they have not forgotten or forgiven what Ghoti Hindus did to Bangals. Okay.
North Indian Bharat perhaps comes from Brahmin traditions, and the South Indian Bharat perhaps comes from Jain traditions. So, we have to think about these things, which we usually don't teach these things in history. Right? The Jain Bharata, who is a Chakravarti from South India, maybe, where, he visits his brother Bahubali statues in the South India. So we have to think about these characters also.
Sanjeev, Sanyal, let me get you to wade in on this. The idea that Bharat is somehow a Brahmanical formulation by the Brahmins in the way they saw and interpreted history, and that there are other traditions, south of India, the Jain tradition as well, which isn't given as much eminence when the name Bharat is propped up in the modern time.
Well, again, I'm sorry to say that Devdutt has presented some of the facts, but his interpretation is entirely garbled, and some of it is actually incorrect. So he mentions the Battle of 10 Kings in Kurukshetra. That's not where it happened at all. It happened on the banks of the Parushni or the Ravi, which is now in the area would be in West Punjab, in what is now Pakistani Punjab, and not in Kurukshetra. Anyway, point is, he is right that there is another tradition of where the Puranic tradition and the Jain tradition, which by the way are very close to each other, that there was a king Bharat who was a Chakravartin, who was the son or grandson of the king Rishabh. So one of those stories, and there are slight variations on it, so I'll give you one of them. So there was a king Rishabh who was a great king, and he's the same king who is supposed to be the founder, incidentally, of the Jain tradition. He had a son, by the way, called Nabhi, who was a great warrior, and he is said to have conquered the Jambu Dvipa, or the subcontinent. And in fact, India has another name, by the way, called Nabhi Varsha. Anyway, his son, Bharat, would then go on to become another great conqueror. And so the name Bharat Varsha is by and large from this tradition. By the way, the Puranic tradition on Bharat Varsha and the Jain tradition agree on this. This is not something of great debate, and turning this into some Brahmanical versus Jain thing is meaningless. Also turning it into a North Indian versus South Indian is meaningless, because by the time these Puranic stories are being written, South India is more than comfortably part of the wider Indic civilizational idea. So just so that you know, the oldest known Tamil text is the Tolpakiyam. Okay, it's a grammar. Tolpakiyam is a Tamil grammar, and in the preface of that grammar, Tolpakiyam, it is very clear that you have the very first enunciation of Tamil identity. And it will come as some surprise to those who prefer a Periyarist view of the world, that in that preface, where the first proclamation of Tamil identity is mentioned, it also mentions that this identity is firmly based on the 4 Vedas. So please go and read the Tolpakiyam, the preface to the Tolpakiyam, and in there read that when the people say, the Tamils enunciate that they are the people who live between the Venkata hills in the north and the Kumari in the south, which is basically not too different from, Kumari is Kanyakumari, and in the north you have the Venkata hills. Then those people, their identity is based on the 4 Vedas. It is very clearly written. There's no way of getting around it.
Okay, Devdutt, Patnaik, as people heard...
So here, Sanjeev Sanyal already casually, calmly, nicely, without having that sarcastic, I'm a nice guy smile, destroyed Devdutt Patnaik, even though a lot of the interview is even left as of yet. So this is why they had to delete the video, basically. So Sanjeev Sanyal is doing a great job at being polite. Okay, he just used that one word random and then said that he uses the word Brahmanical repeatedly, but that does not mean anything. That is just a counter argument. But isse zyada kya kare? And he's keeping his calm cool only because he works out a lot. Usse zyada politeness yahan pe aasha karna galat hai.
Both your answers, would it then be fair to conclude that Bharat has more Indian roots? On balance, you gave the story about Queen Hindu, but on probability, the chances are higher that India is the external interpretation of the name of our motherland as it passes along the west and reaches Greece. That's how it becomes India. So India is really how the Western world saw us, or the Greeks and the Persians saw us, whereas Bharat has stronger Indian roots.
I don't think that the word Bharat comes from India, and in India comes from foreigners. That's not a conclusion. That's your conclusion. That's a political conclusion, and that
Now, what the fuck does this mean? That's a political conclusion or a politician's conclusion. What kind of a counter argument is this?
comes from Chanakya Niti of divide and rule. Sam Dam Danda Bhed.
Now he is being sarcastic with that creepy, fake, polite smile of his.
Bharat has stronger Indian roots.
I don't think that the word Bharat comes from India, and in India comes from foreigners. That's not a conclusion. That's your conclusion. That's a political conclusion, and that comes from Chanakya Niti of divide and rule. Sam Dam Danda Bhed. But India comes from the word Sindhu, which is a Vedic word. Bharat comes from Bharat, which is found in the Vedas. Bharat also comes from Bharat, which is a Jain word. So we must be aware that the word Sindhu was called Hindu by Persians and Hindu by Greeks, but they didn't give us the word. It comes from an Indian river, a Vedic river called Sindhu. So
They literally gave us the word. The origin was not given by them. The derivative was given by them.
The Brahmins of India, the Brahmanas, they have controlled the literature of our land, right? So Aryans, the word Arya comes from Brahmins, but the Jains and the Buddhists look at Aryans very differently compared to the Hindus. So we must be careful of the Brahmin use of the word Bharat and appropriation from the Jain traditions, right? They're appropriating it from the Jain tradition.
Okay, I have something to say about appropriation as well. Now, just because it's cool to criticize appropriation today does not mean appropriation is blanket wrong all the time. Appropriation can also mean accepting and taking interest in someone's culture as well. Okay, if I am a metalhead today and I start a metal band, am I appropriating American culture? What the fuck? I like metal music and I'm doing it myself. I like metal music to that extent. That's my respect for metal music, created not by Indians, which I'm just accepting. I'm thinking, yeah, it works great for me and I will also pursue it. That means appropriation, and that should be criticized.
One can argue, but the word Sindhu is a Vedic word, and India comes from Sindhu. So this internal, external, it's again Brahmanical, right? It's a caste thing, right? What is internal is pure, what is external is malech, is impure, and the impure people should be kept out. The way untouchables were kept out, the untouchables were kept out of our villages. So we should not celebrate this mindset. It's not healthy. This is a very Brahmin caste.
Arey bhai, untouchables were kept out of our villages. What the fuck does this mean? So he or his ancestors were one of the people who kept people out of their villages, but they did live in some villages or in some parts of the city. How were Shudras getting anything done? How were people in the city getting anything done? Kshatriya, Vaishya या फिर ब्राह्मण जाके रास्ता साफ करता था? Out of the village हुआ तो कैसे काम कैसे किया? Okay, or where were they living? In the forests? If the Shudras were living in the forests, who were the Panchamas? What the fuck is he talking about? And even today, don't rich people live in one part of the country and or even the city, and people who work as housemaids in our homes, they live in a different place? That's because of untouchability or just because of economic realities? Oh my god.
Mindset, that internal things, अंदर की चीजें कोटियाड़ के अंदर रखो, उसके बाहर उल्लंघन, Sita crossed the Lakshman Rekha and therefore becomes impure. Outside is bad, inside is good. Not a healthy mindset, I think. We are a plural country. We allow things to come in. Potatoes have come from outside and we celebrate potatoes. Horses have come from outside and we celebrate. Aryans came from outside and we call ourselves Arya Desha. So
oh fuck. Look at the way he's fucking talking. Okay, these fake politeness, these fake polite people is what I can't take absolutely. Sanjeev Sanyal's face is not overtly polite. He's not smiling all the time. This guy has that smile and goes on spewing absolute vile, poisonous bullshit. It's not just a difference of opinion. He's being rude. He's saying vile things to Sanjeev Sanyal and to the people who believe in these arguments and this side of opinions on history.
We should just allow internal. What is it? Everybody came from Africa. So we are all technically, genetically African. So I think these are, but then politicians know better than scholars. We are like, हम तो mythologists हैं, scholars हैं. उनके हाथ में तलवार.
Now he's fucking being sarcastic. The Sanjeev Sanyal is a politician. He knows. हम तो नहीं जानते. हम तो गरीब आदमी हैं.
Those who have the sword are far more powerful than those with a pen, right?
Okay, this
and
is a
Brahmins
fascinating
also.
conversation. I'm not wading in on one side or the other, but to hear both Devdutt Patnaik and Sanjeev Sanyal give their responses one by one gives us the full context of the debate that is at play. I want Sanjeev Sanyal to respond that internal, external, this formulation isn't healthy, can't come to the conclusion that outside is bad, inside is somehow good. Again, making the point that it's the Brahmins who control the literature of the country. Therefore, it's a very Brahmanical way of looking at this country.
Look, Brahmins did control the literature, just like today's scholars control the literature. Doesn't mean some historical realities, okay, some day-to-day realities might be different for a Brahmin from that of a Shudra. देश का नाम अलग नहीं हो जाता है. देश का नाम अलग तो आज के स्कॉलर्स के लिए भी है. ओके, जेएनयू का सोशियोलॉजिस्ट बोल रहा है कि कश्मीर हैज नेवर बीन एन इंटीग्रल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया एंड दैट इज अ हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट. कश्मीर शैविज्म अलग देश में लिखा गया था. तो देश का नाम अलग अलग होना is not what happens, or basic names and names of places, names of things, proper nouns, how much of that was vastly different between a Shudra and a Brahmin? What is going on here?
And it's essentially an appropriation from the Jain traditions, because India also comes from Sindhu, so it is as Indian can be. Sanjeev Sanyal.
Look, I mean, just repeating Brahmanical several times doesn't mean that he answered your question at all. Fact of the matter is, there, as I said, there is a very ancient Vedic tradition which predates Puranic and Jainism.
He doesn't smile or start smiling or stop his smile. He just keeps smiling with that same frozen, creepy face, even when Sanjeev Sanyal also kind of counters him.
Which talks about India as being part of the Bharat tribe and so on. And of course, as I mentioned, also Sapta Sindhu, which, by the way, are related very closely, because the Bharat tribe considered the Sapta Sindhu as being their homeland. And then that idea then spreads. That also we have, as I gave you the chant, that clearly shows this happens. And there are many other evidences. By the time the Puranic evidence comes, the Puranas say that south of the Himalayas and north of the oceans live a people who are the Bharatiya. So again, the more than enough evidence, and I don't know why this should become Jains versus Brahmins or some strange garbled argument. All the Indic religions clearly understand and celebrate the.
So Sanjeev Sanyal is now kind of going a little to the side of rudeness as well, after all the things he said. Politician का argument है, हम तो भाई झोला लेके चलेंगे, हम तो गरीब आदमी हैं, हम तो स्कॉलर है, माइथोलॉजिस्ट है, और ये तो ब्राह्मणिकल आर्ग्यूमेंट है. ये सब इतना बार इसने बोला, उसके बाद संदीप सन्याल थोड़ा बहुत अपना बंदूक निकाल रहा है.
Fact that there is a civilization living between the southern oceans and the northern mountains that consider themselves Bharatiya and partake of the civilization. So this word Bharatiya is very much Indian. Now, as I mentioned, I accept that the word India has Indian origins, but it is not Indian. So Sindhu becomes Hindu, becomes India. So by Devdutt's own admission, that by the time the word becomes India, it is a foreign word. That doesn't mean it's a bad word. It's being used widely. I use it myself. And nowhere has, I think, the government ever said that the word India is being banished. So I don't even understand what this debate is. The constitution clearly says India, that is Bharat. They are both valid words, and we should use them.
So this is why I think Indian government is not really changing officially our name to Bharat or anything. They are just going to casually use Bharat as much as possible everywhere, because constitution में है कि इंडिया और भारत तो सेम ही है, ये इक्वल तो सेम ही है, ऐसे ही कैजुअली हर जगह पे भारत ही यूज कर देंगे. क्या है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली इन इंडिया भारत मींस द सेम थिंग एज इंडिया.
Devdutt Patnaik, changing a name isn't just about nomenclature. It's also cultural, it's political.
So I would say they have even bypassed that sinister skeptical look I was concerned I was having, that they one day a government might do this to gain brownie points, and someone might still do. This government is not even doing it to gain brownie points. They have casually done this, that hey, our country is India, our country is Bharat only, so why not have Bharat in our documents? किसने बोल दिया कि हर जगह इंडिया ही लिखना होगा? India is Bharat.
Bombay became Mumbai, Calcutta became Kolkata, Madras became Chennai. While many opposed these changes at the time, now they seem to be commonly accepted. So what are the similarities you see between the debates that played out at the time when these names were sought to be changed and what we're seeing now?
Yes, changing names is something that politicians do when you're.
Look at this.
We don't give ourselves names, right? Our parents give us names, elders give us names.
Again, he just calls Sanjeev Sanyal's arguments a politician's argument.
Teachers give us names. And then when do we change our names? When we change our religion. When you change your religion, you change your name. When you become a sannyasi, you change your name.
अच्छा, तो अब आओ लाइन पे. रिलीजन चेंज होने से नाम किसका चेंज होता है? जैन कोई जैनिज्म में कन्वर्ट करेगा तो नाम चेंज हो जाएगा, बुद्धिज्म में कन्वर्ट करेगा तो नाम चेंज हो जाएगा। कौन कौन रिलीजन में जाने के लिए नाम चेंज करना पड़ता है, क्यों चेंज करना पड़ता है?
So I think that is where the mindset, changing religion, this conversion idea is what leads us to deny ourselves. The greatest countries in the world have multiple names. Germany is called Deutschland. China is not called China by the Chinese. The local people call it a very different name. Bhutan is called very differently. The Bhutanese call Bhutan Drukgyal, if I'm not mistaken. So in all great civilization, we say Egypt, but the Arabs and call it Misr. So great
अरे भाई, his argument only it should be called Bharat. He is saying that a lot of countries, outsiders call it by some name, the people of that country call themselves by some other name. So we are saying, why should we call ourselves by the same name that is being used by the outsiders? We will also call ourselves Bharat. Let others call us India. इसमें क्या है? हम थोड़ी जाके यूएन में जाके केस करेंगे कि काहे हमको इंडिया बोल दिया। अजीब आर्गुमेंट है, उसका ही आर्गुमेंट उसके अगेंस्ट जा रहा है।
civilizations have different names because different people have engaged with it. I guess we don't want to be a great civilization. We want to follow the Middle Eastern path of
Fuck this
monotheism.
sarcastic asshole. Look at what he's saying. I guess we don't want to engage with other people.
Different people have engaged with it. I guess we don't want to be a great civilization. We want to follow the Middle Eastern path of monotheism, one idea, one thought. We hate our plurality. We see alternate ideas as polluting, which is a Brahmanical caste mindset. I guess that's the path we want to walk, and I think that's an option.
We saw a lot of these debates, Sanjeev, Sanyal, also at the time when the Constituent Assembly was debating. Interestingly, it was on the 18th of September 1949. It's also on the 18th of September that the government has called the special session of parliament. We don't know what will happen on this 18th, but at that time, there were a lot of leaders who made the point that India is not the way the Indians call themselves. They call themselves Bharatiya, and therefore it is a cultural and political thing. The attempt to try and push up the use of the name Bharat, appropriate the name Bharat, and the fact that the Indian political opposition would say that because they call themselves India, which is why it's erupted in this fashion at this moment, because before this, everyone in this government and elsewhere also seemed quite comfortable with the name India. That's happened because there's a political context to this.
See, you're a political journalist, you can decide whatever you wish. The fact of the matter is, this issue was debated in the Constituent Assembly. The Constitution of India begins by saying India, that is Bharat. By the way, the Hindi version says Bharat, Arthat, India. So there is no debate about one word being somehow more important than the other. So my view is, why are we so emotional about the fact that the word government of Bharat is being used? So we will use it. As everybody agrees that it's all right to have different words for a certain country, as we, United Kingdom and Great Britain, Netherlands and Holland, Japan and Nippon, and so on. There are many countries with multiple names. We can also have one. My problem.
Yes. Okay. Saptarshi is saying that if you convert to Hinduism and Jainism, you will come up with you'll have to change your name. What the name they will give is also going to be a Hindu name, isn't it? That's what I'm saying. Because है तो धार्मिक संस्कृताइज्ड नेम ओनली, तो नाम चेंज करके ऐसा नहीं है कि तुम समझ ही नहीं, you will mistake that person for a Hindu, right? If someone has a so-called Buddhist or Jain name, that's what I'm saying.
Problem is that somehow the use of Bharat seemed to have rankled members of the old elite. Somehow they thought that when they were reading the Constitution, I think they misread it as India that was Bharat. But they should read the Constitution. It says India that is Bharat.
Fascinating. As I said, we've already recorded our answers with Devdutt Patnaik before this. Sanjeev was live with us.
Okay. So we got something wrong. He was not saying any of those things to Sanjeev Sanyal. Sanjeev Sanyal was not live at the same time as he. His face was on loop. That's why he was smiling creepily at the entire time. Okay, now let's check some comments. So you see, every argument that came from Sanjeev Sanyal's side, which was basically framed by the anchor also, all that was discarded as Brahmanism or Brahmanical sources. Yeah, the number of fallacies he did, this was insane. Yes, every debate has to go to casteism directly. महावीर जैन तीर्थंकर का नाम था और हनुमान जी को भी कहते हैं. Yes.
जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्य